75歳以上の高齢者に死を選ぶ権利を認め支援する制度、通称プラン75が今日の国会で可決されました。政府に求める国民の声が高まっていました。
This clip is from the trailer of Plan 75, a new indie film about depopulation and its consequences in Japan. The Japanese government has fortunately not yet proposed paid euthanasia to its people, but how did we end up in a situation where this is even imaginable? Let's make a quick recap of Japan's population history and the surrounding context to see where we are in the broader picture. Japan has had a trend of increasing population growth since World War II. It has seen 2 baby booms since then, a small one immediately after the war, and a large one in the 1970s as Japan went into its economic bubble of success in finance. However, since then, population growth has stagnated and birth rates have greatly decreased. The population is predicted to shrink by just under 1/3 to 87 million by 2070. The consequences of this are well discussed in contemporary Japanese media and even by the Prime Minister. Here are the main ones.
まず、宅配流通のドライバー不足です。荷物が届けられない地域というのが発生して、日本の4分の1の地域が事実上住めなくなります。はい、そして建設現場では、修繕が必要な 22% の道路を直すことができなくて、地方部の生活道路が穴だらけになる危険も。そして、医療分野はスタッフ不足で、新設まで長蛇の列が、救急車は搬送先を見つけることができなくて、立ち往生が常態化します。そして、介護現場では、例えば、週5日、訪問介護を受けていた家庭は、週1日から2日来られない、スタッフが来られない事態になる。そして、中小企業は後継者不足になって廃業となり、大企業はベテラン、シニア世代が大量の残業をして仕事をこなす社会になるということなんです。
Japan's population decline is attributed to a trifecta of low birth rates, low immigration, and long life expectancy. But while increased immigration could help, it is not guaranteed that people would continue to come, or would settle in Japan. So it is untenable as a long-term strategy despite its popular advocacy. And long life expectancy, while increasing absolute numbers, causes strains such as with healthcare and expenses in other areas that affect the underlying cause, low birth rates. What are the main reasons then for low birth rates?
This is attributed to the pill. In Japan, the pill was introduced in the early 1990s.
So it's interesting though that while Europe blamed the contraceptive pill for the fall in birth rates,
it's not the case in Japan.
Others, such as Professor Robin LeBlanc of both Washington and Lee universities, argue that economic pressures are causing smaller families, saying, for those men making under $40,000 a year, over 75% are unmarried. More ominously, the suicide rate for men is twice as high as for women in Japan. The conclusion is inescapable that for young men in Japan, the burden of marriage is growing, and therefore they are resisting the institution altogether. But according to demographer Stephen Shaw,
instead of asking why people are having so few children today, I should have been asking why so few people become parents today. It turns out there is no trend towards smaller families. People who do become parents are just as likely to go on to have 2, 3, 4 or more children as decades ago. It's all about having the first child.
He argues this because
in October 1973, the global oil shock sent the country into a frenzy, and the young generation that was just settling into their new modern lifestyle suddenly had to confront sharp price rises in food and commodities and shortages of the basics. And the data shows, precisely 9 months later, across every prefecture in Japan, the number of first-time mothers plummeted and would never recover. Childlessness, for 1/3 of Japanese women, became the societal norm.
As can be seen by
in Japan in 1974, around half of women were having 2 children, just over 1 in 5 was having 3, a similar number was having 1, and 6% were having 4 or more. Overall, the average Japanese mother was having 2.2 children, and with only 1 person in 20 remaining childless, the overall fertility rate for Japan was 2.1 children per woman. But somehow, over the next 3 short years, childlessness exploded to reach 1 person in 4. Yet the percentage of mothers having 1, 2, 3, or 4 or more children hadn't changed at all. This wasn't a shift to smaller families. This was simply an explosion in childlessness. Wind the clock forward to 1990, and childlessness in Japan had reached 1 in 3 women, and yet the average children per mother had increased slightly to 2.3. Since 1990, this pattern has been locked in Japan, with almost no change to family structure or the 1 in 3 remaining childless. Even the proportion of mothers having 4 or more children has remained at 6%, exactly the same as 1974.
Therefore, the core cause appears to be economic pressure delaying the starting of families at all. Japan has been trying to incentivize population growth since 1995 with the Angel Plan to subsidize childcare, with a 2005 proposal for household robots by 2020, with more generous work leave laws in 2010, and this year with Prime Minister Kishida proposing a new government families agency and doubling the spending on families. The effects of depopulation are already being seen in the countryside, where many young people are migrating to the cities for work.
The small towns and villages that those people are leaving from are dying out. And what that looks like is basically schools where there are no students, where a farmer might wonder, who's going to take over my farm when I decide to retire? Or streets lined with shuttered businesses.
Therefore, the government has started schemes that pay people to move from the cities to depopulated villages in the hopes of softening the effects of depopulation, as well as hoping to a lesser extent that it will relieve the economic pressures that cause people to avoid having children. However, the government scheme has not taken off.
But if you look at the numbers, just about 1,500 families have participated in the 3 years that it's existed. And in the big picture of Greater Tokyo, which is a population of 35 million people, that's just a drop in the bucket.
Despite the Japanese government's hopes of increasing its birth rate to 1.8, based on this and based on past initiatives, it seems like money is fundamentally not enough to solve this as a problem, as Eurasia Group's lead Japan analyst, David Bowling, says. The government has provided financial incentives in the past and created a cabinet minister for dealing with the low birth rates, but the births continue to drop. The decline in birth rates appears to be a global phenomenon, as TLDR News notes.
The global fertility rate will continue to fall from 2.3 births per woman today to an expected 2.1 by 2050, all over the world, not just in places like Japan, the UK, and the US, but also in Italy and basically the entirety of the EU, Brazil, Mexico, Thailand, China, and more.
It is generally argued on the global scale that these financial
policies in places like Singapore, Japan, and Italy have so far proven to be pretty ineffective.
However, there is a possibility for success with aggressive financial incentives, as shown by Hungary, who have raised their birth rate from 1.25 to 1.6 in 9 years, annually spending approximately 3.4% of GDP, about $5.6 billion in 2019, compared to Japan's newly announced $25 billion, about 0.6% of GDP. Ultimately, though, it is doubted that this alone will work as a long-term strategy, even if it succeeds in the short term, with birth rates already falling again according to the New York Post. Therefore, that Japan's new policies are a fraction of the relative amount of spending compared to Hungary's, with Hungary already struggling to fully reverse the decline, it is easy to say that while these policies may slightly mitigate population decline, they will not reverse it entirely. While such specific interventions like this may not be predictable, looking at history may help Japan. It is clear that even if Japan wanted to, it cannot import more people from abroad endlessly, because it is a global problem and there will eventually be no one left to bring. Therefore, the only long-term strategy is to grow their way out. While economic incentives like this may mitigate such a steep decline, as Hungary shows, it cannot be guaranteed nor reverse the trend. Combating this problem is as much an ethical question as a practical one, and it will depend on what Japan wishes its values to be as to what the best solution is. According to Dr. Patricia Bowling, we can see Japan used to have strong family values, and perhaps these may need to be rediscovered if Japan is to survive. For all these economic concerns are ultimately rooted in the desire to provide a certain type of expected lifestyle that may need to be sacrificed for the sake of children. The question is, can Japan bring itself to divorce its capitalist obsession in favor of its traditional family roots, or is it too firmly wed?